We warned them. Not with speeches, not with threats. Just silence, the kind that settles over a battlefield before the first scream. The kind that makes old generals hold their breath. They never listened. The Galactic Assembly's main hall shimmered beneath its artificial sky, programmed to replicate a neutral dawn. Delegates from 72 species sat in curved tiers around the speaking floor, murmuring in soft frequencies and blinking alien eyelids. At the center stood the human diplomat, Ambassador Elias Rain. Tall, composed, eyes like he was always listening for something you couldn't hear. I watched from the shadows above the hall, seated in a black observation pod lined with neural tracking gear. My name doesn't matter. I don't speak at these gatherings. I listen. I record. I predict. And today, I predicted something no one else dared to say aloud. Someone was going to try and kill Elias Rain. There was tension in the air. Not the usual cultural friction, not the posturing common in diplomatic forums. This was different. This was sharp. Species that once hissed and argued now sat eerily quiet when humans spoke. Even the Jiralan, who couldn't stay silent for 10 seconds without rupturing a lung sac, had fallen still. Something had shifted. Rain spoke in that slow, deliberate cadence Earth trained its diplomats to use when navigating alien syntax. The Outer Rim Accords do not serve peace, he said, voice echoing cleanly. They serve containment. And containment leads to fear. Murmurs rippled through the tiers. The Drakari representatives didn't flinch. They never did. Clad in armor despite the Assembly's demilitarization clause, the reptilian delegation glared from beneath bone-plated brows. That's where I spotted him. He stood motionless behind the Drakari senator, an honor guard by designation. Muscles rigid under ceremonial plating. But his heart rate betrayed him. It accelerated, then slowed, too controlled. I flagged the bio readout to my neural feed. He wasn't a guard. He was an operative. No direct proof, not yet. But his right gauntlet shimmered, just for a blink. Camouflage failure. The kind that happened when weapon tech strained under suppression fields. The Assembly banned energy weapons in the hall, but humans didn't trust bans. Neither, it seemed, did the Drakari. Rain continued, we came to share, not dominate. Yet every step toward unity is met with suspicion. Earth does not demand allegiance. We ask only for partnership. A click echoed across the chamber. Soft. Precise. I moved faster than I should have, hand gripping the override console. I tagged the Drakari operative and cued a kinetic field pulse, non-lethal, but enough to knock him off balance. Too late. He moved. It was fluid, disturbingly so. In a single motion, the Drakari soldier leapt the tiered seats, arm raised, gauntlet splitting open with a hiss. A projectile, needle-thin, designed to bypass bone and armor alike, launched toward the human diplomat. Then time fractured. The whole security AI responded, but not fast enough. Rain never flinched. A pulse of transparent energy, unmarked, human origin, flashed inches from his chest. The projectile disintegrated mid-air, turned to harmless static. And in the next moment, the attacker was on the ground, screaming. His gauntlet had exploded inward, his own weapon reversed on him. Human tech. Rain walked toward him slowly, like a teacher approaching a defiant student. The assembly had erupted into chaos, delegates shouting in 30 languages, guards flooding the room. But Rain's voice cut through it all. Name. The soldier spat, blood and pride. Rain crouched, not a trace of anger in his face. You failed, he said softly. But your people didn't. Confusion flickered in the soldier's eyes. Rain leaned closer. They succeeded in one thing. They proved us right. The soldier barked something in Drakari, defiant. Rain didn't react. He simply stood, turned his back, and walked toward the exit. Just before crossing the threshold, he paused. Then he looked over his shoulder. To your leaders, he said, his voice now sharp as a knife, tell them this, you had 3 hours. And he was gone. The hall froze. Not in fear. Not yet. But the seed had been planted. 3 hours. And I knew, without need for confirmation, something irreversible had just been set in motion. And it had a timer. They put the Drakari soldier in a containment pod 2 levels below the assembly floor. Reinforced alloys, neural dampeners, triple-locked. Overkill for a man who'd already lost the only weapon that mattered, surprise. He didn't beg. He stared at the walls, unmoved, blood still drying along the serrated ridges of his jaw. An interpreter asked his name again. He gave none. Just silence. The human delegation didn't ask for custody. They didn't request an inquiry. They didn't even demand sanctions. They simply left. Ambassador Rain boarded his transport without a word to anyone. No fanfare, no press, no debrief. His face was expressionless, but I saw the tightness in his shoulders. I saw the way his fingers trembled just once as he reached for the shuttle hatch. Something had broken. And it wasn't fear. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. The usual chaos followed, accusations hurled, protocols cited, apologies issued like coins in a marketplace. The Drakari delegation distanced themselves from the attack, denounced their own soldier as a rogue, a radical, mentally unstable. Their ambassador, voice laden with false gravity, bowed before the council and asked for forgiveness. The humans didn't respond. They didn't log back into the Assembly's communications grid. No live transmissions. No status pings from their embassy. No requests for counsel. They had vanished. Not from the galaxy, but from diplomacy. My name still didn't matter, but my clearance did. I was one of the few non-humans with eyes on their deepnet. For years, I'd studied them, patterns, decisions, behavior matrices. And in those cold patterns, I now saw something terrifying: deviation. At 2:04 assembly time, a dormant protocol reactivated on the human defense grid. It was called Oblivion Key. Most thought it a myth, a Cold War failsafe encoded before humans joined the assembly. An autonomous sequence with no verbal override. Once triggered, it would execute an action, and the action would be irreversible. I traced the chain backward. The diplomat had authorization to unlock it. One voice command, buried in his final transmission: initiate Black Rule 1. Black Rule 1 was a legend. Even the humans whispered about it like it was a ghost in the machine. No fleet. No war declaration. Just silence, followed by absence. The countdown started. 3 hours. No one but me seemed to realize. The Drakari Senate issued another apology, this time directly to Earth. Their message was diplomatic poetry: sorrow, regret, peace offerings, cultural miscommunication. They offered to hand over the assassin, extradite him even. There was no reply. Just a digital echo. Acknowledged. Not even signed. Galactic channels lit up with speculation. Some thought humans were bluffing. Others panicked. A few laughed, drunk on the arrogance of peace. But peace doesn't hum like that. It doesn't hide behind encryption algorithms 20 years ahead of anything in the quadrant. It doesn't go quiet. War does. At 3:16 assembly time, human assets began to vanish from neutral territories. Outposts abandoned. Listening stations shut down. Civilian ships rerouted. Diplomats gone. Entire embassies scrubbed from the grid like they'd never existed. Then the AI walls closed in. The Drakari homeworld's orbital satellites, commercial, military, even civilian telecoms, began to fail one by one. Each went dark within a span of 12 minutes. Engineers scrambled to fix them, assuming malfunction. They blamed solar interference. It wasn't interference. It was preparation. I watched the data collapse in real time. Feed by feed. Stream by stream. A quiet suffocation of information. No trace signatures. No hacker trails. Just one line buried in the last active beacon above the Drakari capital. We remember. Still, the assembly debated. Still, they called for restraint. Still, they hoped for negotiations. Hope was dead. Ambassador Rain's final message played again in my mind. You had 3 hours. 2 had passed. There was no retaliatory fleet. No planet-killer cruisers leaving human space. Just the void. But humanity had never needed ships when it came to retribution. They built things quieter, older, smarter. One such thing had recently shifted orbit, barely noticeable. It was once believed to be an inactive satellite from Earth's second expansion age. No weapons, no drive signature, no registry. It now hung directly above Drakari Prime. And it was listening. I filed an emergency escalation to the Assembly's Security Council. I told them what I'd seen. The protocol. The movements. The message. They ignored it. A delegate from the Emirene said, "Humans are too invested in diplomacy to destroy a homeworld." I didn't answer. Because investment has limits. And I'd seen the footage from Varela Colony, after pirates took human children hostage. I'd watched what happened when negotiations failed. The silence. The flash. The crater. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was something else. Something colder. And if the Drakari thought their apology mattered now, they hadn't been listening. They never listened. The final 10 minutes began with a whisper. The black satellite above Drakari Prime opened. Not a hatch. Not a weapon port. Just opened. Like it was remembering how to breathe. It spoke in pulses humans could hear but no other race could decrypt. I translated them anyway. 4 syllables. Ancient Earth dialect. 3 hours passed. And nothing followed. Not yet. But something was coming. And it would not knock. They expected thunder. When the humans finally acted, the Assembly thought it would come with fire, plasma cannons, orbital bombardments, ships blotting out the stars. That's how power is usually expressed in the galaxy, loud, angry, kinetic. But humanity had evolved past noise. They had mastered consequence without spectacle. At exactly 3 hours and 40 seconds after the assassination attempt, the Drakari homeworld fell silent. Not exploded. Not scorched. Silent. First, their planetary communications dropped, not cut, not jammed. They still blinked, transmitted, repeated, but to nothing. The signals echoed across empty relays. Every satellite responded in perfect harmony, but the data they carried was blank. Conversations dissolved mid-word. Civilian requests turned to static. Emergency beacons looped on repeat with no return path. Then their power grids faltered. Not failed, faltered. Lights dimmed like the planet had blinked and forgotten how to open its eyes. Military bases switched to backup reactors. Hospitals ran on isolated cores. But the degradation continued, gentle, inevitable, like gravity itself had shifted. The humans hadn't fired a shot. They had erased context. I watched from a cloaked station drifting in low orbit, invisible to Drakari sensors, fully tapped into their planetary feeds. My name still doesn't matter. What matters is that I understood, finally, what 3 hours meant. It wasn't a warning. It was a countdown to extinction without destruction. Beneath me, cities fell into quiet confusion. Aircraft grounded themselves, unable to distinguish up from down. Navigation arrays displayed only one direction, inward. Buildings, once humming with computational activity, flickered and stopped. Entire knowledge grids, history, law, art, reformatted into blank slates. Then came the light. Not from the sky. From below. Drakari soil had once housed their oldest archive, a memory vault embedded deep within the planet's crust, a living database that recorded every generational truth since their exodus from the volcanic moons of Letricus. It went dark. Not deleted. Disowned. The ground didn't shake. The seas didn't rise. But when the Drakari looked to their past, they found nothing looking back. Their ancestors, their myths, their wars and victories, all gone. Extracted like weeds from a garden. The humans had removed them from themselves. That was the punishment. No war. Just erasure. And still, the Assembly hesitated to name it. What had happened? A mass blackout? A software virus? A systems failure? Each explanation only highlighted their fear of the obvious, that humanity had done something no other species dared imagine. They made forgetting a weapon. Ambassador Rain didn't speak again. No declarations, no demands, no celebration. He returned to Earth quietly, entered the core diplomatic sanctuary, and didn't come back out. Some say he was suspended for violating galactic peace accords. Others claim he was promoted to a rank that doesn't have a name. I believe something else. I believe he mourned. Because in his final report, classified, but leaked all the same, he wrote a single line before signing off. They were warned. I spoke with mercy. The silence was theirs. The Drakari now live. They breathe. They build. They eat and sleep and speak. But their records are gone. Their history is a blank corridor with no doors. The language they use was seeded back into their minds by human neurostabilizers. Their rituals feel hollow, artificial. Like copies of copies. They don't remember why they fought. Or why they ever hated Earth. But deep down, buried beneath neurons and instinct, there's something else now. A fear. Not of invasion. Not of death. Of vanishing. Because somewhere in their blood, they know, it happened once. It could happen again. The Assembly now treats humanity with reverence disguised as respect. Their requests are passed without debate. Their warnings are heard in complete silence. The joke used to be that humans brought fire to the stars. Now they bring absence. And absence is louder than fire. I still monitor them, out of curiosity more than duty. Rain hasn't spoken in years, but his image is broadcast throughout Earth-controlled sectors. Not as a hero. As a reminder. Humans don't raise their voices. They simply leave you with nothing left to remember why they should. And in a galaxy full of sound, that silence is infinite. The universe didn't end. Trade resumed. Star routes reopened. The Assembly convened again under its shimmering dome, the artificial dawn cycling without interruption. Delegates returned to their seats, argued over tariffs and migration quotas, pretending nothing had happened. That's what politicians do when faced with a horror too vast to name, they dilute it with bureaucracy. But something had changed. There was an empty tier now, where the Drakari used to sit. Their delegation was never officially expelled. No announcement. Just absence. When questioned, Assembly officials responded with vague statements. They are in transition, or reviewing internal matters. Everyone knew the truth. No species that forgets itself can legislate for others. And the humans? They came back. Not immediately. Not in force. Just one voice. Ambassador Elias Rain returned, standing in the same central floor beneath the artificial sky. He looked older. Not in the face, but in the way he carried silence. As though it weighed more now. His eyes scanned the tiers, pausing briefly on the empty Drakari section before settling on the Assembly chair. I am not here to gloat, he began. That alone unsettled the room. Because it meant he had every reason to. I am here, he continued, because humanity still believes in diplomacy. We do not wish to rule. We do not seek submission. But if you threaten us, if you harm our people, we will not respond in the way you expect. He let that hang there, cold and steady. Because we understand a truth most species run from: memory is power. And the loss of it is war. No one interrupted. Not even the Lothari, who considered silence a form of insult. Not even the Ziran archivists, whose entire culture revolved around historical continuity. They simply listened. Because they had seen what happened when humans stopped talking. Rain stepped down without requesting votes or amendments. He walked past the Emirene, who bowed their spined heads in genuine deference. Past the Alexians, who flickered their skin patterns in a silent apology. No one made eye contact. Not really. Not after what had been done. Outside the chamber, in the corridor of sealed records, I met him. I hadn't planned to. I'd been compiling a report, one I wasn't even sure would be archived anymore. But when I saw him, I froze. Not in fear. In gravity. Rain didn't move like a diplomat anymore. He moved like someone who had done the unthinkable and lived through it. I was wrong, I said. He stopped. I thought you wouldn't act, I added. That you'd protest, withdraw, issue sanctions. I thought you'd hesitate. Rain studied me, eyes unreadable. You thought we were bluffing. I thought you were civilized. That, strangely, made him smile. But it wasn't pleasant. "So did we," he said. There was no more conversation after that. He left me standing there, datapad in hand, wondering what kind of species makes mercy feel like a warning. Later that cycle, a memo leaked from the human enclave on Jupiter's third moon. A defense strategist had written it years ago, back when Earth was still begging for a seat in the assembly. It was short, unremarkable, but the last line caught fire across the networks. "If they strike us, let them do so with full memory. Because what comes next will be silence, and silence cannot be reasoned with." Now, centuries of galactic war had been redefined. No longer were civilizations racing for bigger fleets, louder guns, faster bombs. Now, they raced for firewalls, data vaults, neural echo chambers, anything that might hold on to who they were if Earth ever turned its eyes on them again. And Earth? Earth watched. They didn't demand tribute. They didn't issue decrees. They simply walked through the assembly halls like ghosts in daylight, seen, heard, and never questioned. But there were still whispers. Always whispers. What if the Drakari had succeeded? What if the assassin's needle had pierced Rain's heart? Would Earth have hesitated then? Or would they have done more than erase a species' memory? Would they have ended them entirely? I think about that often. Because in Rain's silence, I hear the answer. They didn't retaliate because he lived. And if he hadn't? There would be no ruins. No mourning. No aftermath. There would be a hollow where a star system used to be, and a galaxy trying very hard not to remember what it had done wrong. Humanity doesn't raise its voice. It just writes your eulogy in silence.